Hello, welcome to the August 11th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a Club Cubase livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase that you're using or other Steinberg programs. So if it's like the different levels of Cubase, such as Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, such as 13, 14, and 15, and also which operating system, such as Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. You will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid repeating questions, we will go through all of them in order. That would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. And when we should have an index of all topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. So if you want to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, we've had about over 45,000 different topics in more than 2,000 hours of live streams. You can go to cubaseindex.com. I also have a Word document that I'm willing to share to anyone who wants to email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de. So we want to give a special thanks to Jan for creating the site cubaseindex.com. We have two people as service moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They just wanted to make it a better community experience. So we'll give special thanks to them. And we will extend our additional gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So that's a great area for Steinberg users to download templates, presets, logical editor, project logical editor presets, tutorial links. So it's a really wonderful resource for the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'm presenting from just outside of the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to let us know feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from in the comments field. One quick note, I will have to be out of town on Friday afternoon of this week, so we won't have a Club Cubase this upcoming Friday. We will resume our normal schedule on Tuesday. So just a quick programming note. So the next Club Cubase live stream will be a week from today on the 18th of August. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So we see Michael Marshall joining us from Somerset, UK. We have Audi Lee joining from Austria. Great to see Walter Blackledge who's a member of the in-person Club Cubase in St. Louis in America. We have Parabot 2 joining from Australia. See Uno Momento joining from Finland, where it's a cold 13 degrees Celsius. I hope it warms up for you so you can enjoy the rest of summer. We see Adam Langford joining from Bedfordshire in the UK. We have Stefan also joining from Sweden. Adam Langford says it's 23 degrees Celsius here, but it could hit 38 degrees Celsius. It's too hot. Right, we have VS Terranova joining from Amsterdam. Right, we have John Barry. It says summer here in South Devon, England. Feeling hot, hot, hot. Jazz Dude on. Hate everything he does. All right, so we see Benny joining from Sweden. Terry Gray joining from Minnesota. All right, we have Tim Weinheimer joining from Mission Viejo, California. We have my Logify says, welcome everyone to the best DAW possible on Earth. All right. Tim Weinheimer asks, Greg, can you show me how you organize your Cubase project folders, project backups, and audio in the folders? Thanks. Okay. Okay, so let's say if I was doing a new project, so I like to keep every song, every project into its own separate unique folder. So when I start a project, what I would do is just come over here. Let's do a new project. I'm going to start maybe with a template. I'll start with an empty project in my case here. So let's say, okay, let's create an empty project. And this is the critical thing. A lot of people may use the same folder over and over and over again. So I would always kind of use a unique folder. So, if you're doing an album project, maybe there's, and there's 10, 12 songs on your album. Perhaps you could have the album as a folder and then each song or project within that album folder to be its own. So I'm going to come over here. Let's say I want to do a new folder, and we'll say Tim Weinheimer. Okay, so let's say this is going into my live streams. That's the name of the album. I'm going to have a folder here. All right, so now I have a project folder, and we could see this project folder. So when I come over here, if I go to my project setup from the project menu or hit Shift plus the letter S, we could see our project location has not been saved yet. So we have a project. I'm going to go ahead and do a recording. So I'm going to add an audio track. Okay. So we'll just call this our test record. Okay. So I'm going to come over here. I do recording. So we see the file we name the audio file first so that becomes the audio file name as opposed to like audio 01. Right, so I'm going to open up my Finder, or you could open up Explorer on Windows platform. Let's go to, let's say, my projects. I'm going to go to live streams. Okay, and then see my Tim Weinheimer folder that was created today. When I open that up, we don't have a project because we haven't saved a project. We're going to have an audio file. So we have our audio file we just recorded directly in our project. So right now we have an audio file. So the audio file as it's being recorded is recorded to the disk, and that audio file is saved, but we haven't saved the project yet. So if I go to add an audio track and I do recording here, these files are saved on my hard disk, but I don't have a project saved to allows me to recall the location of these recordings. The project would also contain automation, MIDI data. So if I add an instrument track, my instrument track is not going to be preserved until I actually save. Say, I have this going on and I select my player. So I have all of these different parts here, but we haven't saved the project. So if you haven't saved the project yet, it's going to be indicated at the top here as Untitled 2. Now, when I go to save a project, it'll prompt me for a name, and it's going to place this into the folder for me automatically. So when I do Untitled, I'll give it a name. Okay, so that's the name of our project. I could confirm that by going to my project setup, which is Shift plus the letter S. And we can see that, okay, we see the path of where our project folder is. So I'm going to just quickly come over to my settings, and let's go to under General, and I'll just say I'm going to enable my autosave button. Okay, so I'll come over here. Let's set it for 1 minute. All right, so now I have this. I want to do, let's say, a mix down of my project. So I'm going to come over here. Let's do an export audio mix down. And then as we do this, it should automatically place it into the project mix down folder. So I'll just come right over here. We'll say mix, export the audio. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Finder window. Again, let's go to our projects. And we'll go, it's going to be your live streams. And we see our Tim Weinheimer. All right, so now that we did a mix down, we can see that our mix down file is, this folder is automatically created. We see an images folder that's automatically created, which is going to be the waveforms of these audio files. And because I set my autosave to 1 minute, if I have autosaves on, the autosaves goes directly into its own unique folder as well. So the mix down folder is created when you mix down a file. The autosaves folder is created as soon as there's an autosave for the particular project. So if I wanted to archive this project with all of the different elements that is in it, I could now have this one folder that I could share. I could compress an email or compress and send via Dropbox or cloud sharing. And that would contain all the different elements for that project self-contained in this one folder. So that's how I would do it. Just change my preference back. Not auto-saving all of mine. Generally recommend autosave for people unless you're doing demos like me, or you want to start at the same state constantly. But let me know if that makes sense, Tim. But a lot of it, once you define your unique audio folder or unique project folder, a lot of it will automatically be created to be within the particular folder. All right, so Benny's asking, Greg, how's it going at your new job? So I'm loving it so far. Just a couple mornings I have to start it, like, get up at 5 a.m. for a 5:30 a.m. meeting my time, just so I'm not keeping everyone waiting in Europe. But so far, I've really enjoyed working for Steinberg. Everyone's been incredibly wonderful. I'm so glad to be able to work directly for Steinberg. It's very aligned to what I wanted to do. All right, so we have Oreo joining from Italy. Thanks for being online with us. We see John Costigan joining from Wisconsin. Memento wants people to whack the like button. So we see Tim Weinheimer just says, thanks, Greg. That helps a lot. Cool. Adam Langford says he's whacked the like button. All right, let me go to question that was sent in advance here. All right, so we see a question was mailed in is how to best use the direct routing feature in the mixer. Okay, so let's take a quick look. So direct routing is a really interesting aspect of Cubase. A lot of times when we're working with different projects, if we have kind of a very complex mix project, we may run into scenarios where we're using a lot of, where we're using lots of different insert effects, send effects, and routing. So direct routing would allow us to send a track to multiple destinations. So often when we're doing like, routing on a particular track, we may be using sends. So if we want to send a track to a group, for instance, we could use a send effect. So if I have an effect, I could use my send effect. And, let's say if I am here and I choose to add, let's say, an effects channel track, let's add a standalone effects channel outside of the group. So say we add a reverb. Okay, so if I go to my snare track, we could send this to a particular like reverb or to a group track, and we could send this in varying amounts. But in a complex mix, you may have, multiple groups, especially if we're doing parallel processing. So you may have, 10 groups, one track could be, run out of destinations within our 8 effect sends. So if you're using 6 for effects and you need to send it to different parallel processing, like 4 different sources, you quickly run out of your aux sends. So if you don't need to adjust the level, which is often the case with groups, it's going to be sent often as a static level gain-wise. What we could do is just, when we go to our mixer, we could enable direct routing. So when I come over here, we could just say, go to your setup sections, and then you'll see direct routing. So if you don't see it at the mixer, we could just enable it. You'd right click on one of the tabs, select setup sections, and go to direct routing. Now, direct routing has a little preference that you should be aware of. So once we come to direct routing, if you go to the mixer setup, we can do this in the lower zone as well, you probably want to see a little option here for direct routing summing mode. So you probably want to check that so that we can send direct routing to multiple destinations. So in this case, I have, let's say, a drums and bass. All of my drums are going to a folder track with group channel. So I could control my volume here. But let's say if I want to also send all these with direct outs, let's say I'm using all of my effect sends, and I just want to use direct outputs, what I can do now is I'm going to select, let's say, my drum tracks. I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key plus the Shift key. And then I'm going to do it. I'm not going to select the folder track, but all the sources rather. I'm going to come over here, Alt or Option plus the Shift key. And now I could say, I'm going to send these out. I'm going to let's make a new group here first. All right, so I'm going to go to this track here. Let's add a group track. So we're going to add a destination, and we'll call this drum parallel. So we have a stereo group. Okay, so I'm going to take my drum tracks here, and now that we have a destination, I'm going to select all the tracks and hold down Alt or Option plus Shift again to enable Q-Link, or you could hit the Q-Link icon at the top there. And now we're going to send these all to the drum parallel. So come right over here, drum parallel. So we see that this is now been created. So when we do this, so let me go. All right, so I see a multi-drum where this is going into my drums. And if I want to send all these to my drum parallel, I would, again, while they're all selected, turn it on here. Now on my parallel group, I may want to do different processing. So let's come over here. I will just go to like the standard compressor here, and I'm going to squash it pretty heavily. I want to maybe also come over and let's run it through an envelope shaper. So maybe I want the length and release to be a little longer here. So when I do this, my drums are going to 2 different destinations in parallel. So they're being summed into this group here, but they're also being sent directly to my drum, so I could blend this in and kind of find a sweet spot. So if we do this, we could say, okay, I want to blend this in so I can kind of get the impact of the compression on the parallel group without affecting the dynamics that are being unprocessed. So if I take this out again, let's say I just mute, we can see what our drums are. Now we can kind of get that magic drum sound. Now what's really interesting about this is we could actually automate our routing as well. So let's say I want to start at the beginning of the project. I'm going to place automation on the track. So let's say I'm going to start when it goes into, I'm going to select all my drum tracks here. So let's say now when it comes to the modulation, and let's say when we go back to where it goes back to the first part of the project, I could just take off the routing to the parallel group. So the drums maybe aren't as exciting here. And then if I automate, so if I wanted to give a little bit of a lift in the chorus, you could just automate when to apply parallel processing. So if we want to listen to that again, when it circles back around about 4 measures, so do our turnaround here. So if you want to be able to automate when parallel processing comes in as well. So those are like 2 really great uses of direct routing. Also, if you had this set up with like maybe a hearback monitoring system, you could take you could add 8 groups here, send those to 8 physical outputs of your audio interface. And then that could be fed into like a hardware, if you're doing hardware like headphone monitoring systems, like an Aviom system, I believe is a company that makes it. So a couple of things that you could do with that. So Tim Weinheimer says, well, I just need to track some missing audio files on some older projects. So a lot of times if you're looking for a tip, if you're looking for like a missing audio file, if you go into the pool window, so if you hit Control or Command plus the letter P, you should, if you kind of scroll all the way over, so if you have like a missing file, often you get a little indication there. If you scroll all the way over, this would give you the path where the audio file is looking for that particular file. So at this point, you could just, look there first. So maybe if it's the folder moved, like physical drives, you could say, okay, I'm looking in a folder called live streams, and then you could look for a folder named live stream. And at that point, that could give you an idea of exactly where the files are. If you're in a project and you realize that You have different files that are located in different locations, and you want to consolidate all of the audio files to the current active audio folder within the current project folder. Just go to your media menu, and then we could just choose to prepare archive. And prepare archive would move all the files that are in other folders besides the project folder and would move them directly into your project file folder for you. But if you always kind of start off with good file management, if you talk to lots of engineers, lots of composers, one of their skills that they, will say is essential for their success is file management and keeping track of all your files and having kind of, particular approaches and kind of techniques for managing all of your files. All right, so we have Marvin joining from South Africa. This is his first time, so thanks for joining us today. He says, so how to link Cubase and Wavelab. All right, so if I have Wavelab here, if I wanted to edit directly inside of Wavelab, there's two ways to do it. So one is just to select your file here in your Cubase project, and we could choose to, from the audio menu, to edit in Wavelab. That will launch Wavelab. And now we could just come over and just close this out and take this file, edit in Wavelab, and now I could, just come over here, do edit in Wavelab, and then once we take this, we could have it automatically, if we come right over here, you'll see this little icon where you say trigger Cubase Nuendo update. So if I do that, any change I make here in Wavelab would automatically be reflected, as we see right here, inside of Cubase. So there's kind of a bi-directional communication with that. Now, another method to do this is, let's say, okay, I want to do editing on this. If you have Wavelab 13, I think this may have started with Wavelab 12, but we could do it as an ARA extension. So this way I could say, okay, when we go to from our inspector menu, or if we just come directly from you may be able to see the ARA extension, right, just all the way right. But if you just come directly here, so if we have the event, see where it says no extension, at this point we could just say, let's open this in Wavelab. So when we generally open up an audio file, it goes into our sample editor. Now that this has our ARA extension, when I double click on the file, we now launch Wavelab from within Cubase. So basically the sample editor has been replaced so that when I do edits here, and just like we have the trigger effect, if we wanted to make this permanent, I could just come right over here and say make this track extension or the edits that I've made in Wavelab here, and then I could just simply choose to make that extension permanent right there. Or you could choose no extension. When you double click, you're directly back to where you started. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Marvin, and thanks for joining us today on the live stream. All right, so we see from Audi Lee says, hi, great question. Why is the audio recording level coming into the input channel getting reduced by a couple dB when going straight to the selected track? Everything linear, no effects. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to, before we start, we're going to take our control room down. I'm just going to put a test tone on a track. So I'm going to add an audio track here. Okay, so we'll get to our mix console. So let's say, like, as I add this audio track, I'll add a stereo track. Okay, and I'm going to set this from my stereo in that I have here. Okay, on my stereo input channel, just to kind of test this, and a good plug-in used to test this, I'm going to just go to, let's say, my inserts, and we have a test tone generator plugin. So here we can see that I'm at minus 18 dB. Okay. So I'm in, right? So I don't want this necessarily on my, I'm going to put this as an insert on my input channel. Let's do that. So you see I had it set to default by minus 18 dB. Okay, so let's look at it. So we have our level here set to minus 18 dB. So if we look at it, we can see that our input gain is at 0, our channels at 0, our master is at 0, and they are all at minus 18 dB. Now let's check to see if we have, if it's going to be a mono versus stereo, if that's making a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll take this track out of record. I'm going to add a mono source. So let's add an audio track. Instead of it being a stereo track, let's make it a mono track. So we come over here, and for this input, I want it to be, let's say, our left input of our stereo in. And we can see that as we do this here, that because we have a stereo input source, and we see it in a mono track, that we see minus 3 dB. So here we're at minus 24, and we see that this is carried over. So this could be due to our stereo pan law. So let's try going, so if it's a mono stereo mismatch, try going to your project setup, and let's adjust our pan law, and let's set it to maybe equal power. And then we could see that, we could see that we have the same kind of level. We did this to minus 3 dB. Let's do it to minus 6 dB. So this way, kind of as you're adding sources, like, you could compensate for that with stereo pan law. So check your pan law settings. And so if I have that set to 0 dB, we see that it's going to be, and what the pan law allows you to do is, as you take like a source that's, this loud in the left and right channels, if you double the, if you're doubling the sound or doubling the channels, that it will, when you're doubling the source, that increases the volume by 3 dB. So to compensate for that, check just to make sure that your pan law is set accordingly. And you can see what the difference that the pan law is making. So SSL consoles are famous for minus 4.5 dB. Come over here to minus 3. We can see it closer. And if we have that set to 0 dB, now we see the same levels. So see if you get this, also make sure you don't have any, indicate that you don't have any plugins, but see if it's a mono, the stereo input going into a mono source, the stereo pan law could have an impact on that. So let me know if that makes sense. That's where I would investigate. All right, so we see 3 thumbs up from Mr. Vlogify. G.A. Henke on. Thanks for joining us. All right, John Barry is asking, hi Greg, I have one instrument track that will not let me render, option blacked out. I tried rendering it once and it did not work, so did undo, and now option is blank. Any ideas? Okay, so let me just add an instrument track here. Cool. All right, so I have some MIDI. Let me just see if the track is frozen. If you render it, what happens? All right, so let's say if I come here and I go to render in place. So make sure that you don't have, like the track frozen by any chance. So if I come here, I can come over and say, okay, when I have this, so I go to my edit menu, you see I have my render in place settings. If we go to like the VST instrument rack here, you could also freeze on the instrument rack. So if for some reason you've frozen it, and then because it's already kind of rendered, it doesn't show up as a rendered in place until it's unfrozen. So check, John, just to make sure that you haven't frozen the track or the instrument in the instrument rack. I often sometimes get this when people, if they come over here and let's say if they have like maybe another like event selected, so make sure one that you have the event selected. Sometimes if the track is disabled, then if I come over here, let's disable this track, then I don't think it's going to allow me to freeze or to do a render in place. So check those things and see if it's frozen or if the track is disabled by any way. So sometimes you may not notice the event when the track is disabled. So if we have this event colored, so we have, let's say that, and we'll disable the track. So you may not see it in the event, but if we go to render in place, then it's going to be blank because the track itself is disabled. So check to see if it's like one of those things that maybe popped up in your workflow. All right, so we have Randy Lee Music joining directly from Dallas, Texas area. Thanks for being online. We have Gerald Ely joining earlier than he usually is, or saying hi earlier than he usually is. Great to see you on from Martinez, California. All right, so we have the Elements Music asks, is it possible to change multiple VSTI at the same time? Let's suppose I have 4 high and want to change all of them to 4 groove agents. I'm not sure if we could, let's give it a shot. So let me just move these tracks. All right, so let's say if I'm here and I'm bored, for some MIDI notes here. All right, so let's say we have all these. Let me just change one preference so I get colors back. Okay, so let's say now we have 4 groove agent tracks. So I'm not sure if you have the channels that exist already. Great, so let's come over here. I'm going to select these tracks here. And let's try going into our output routing here. See if we could output routing. Let me just see if it's. So I know that we could take this and one at a time switch it to like a Groove Agent SE and swap out the instrument if it's an instrument track. Let me see if we can. Here. I don't think we could select multiple tracks here. Let me try it. Just going to select one at a time here. We do. Put this back to Nick. I think if it was MIDI tracks, to add like 4 MIDI tracks. Then if we have the MIDI tracks, I could take these and if I hold down my Alt or Option plus Shift, I could send them all to the same. I think I could increment the MIDI ports here. Try from a different. And send them all to the same instrument there. But I think if, so you might have to do it one at a time. And if you wanted to switch, like, this Halligan Sonic to a different instrument, you could do it here and just load up. Let's say, okay, I want that going to Pad Shop now. So now that instrument, but I don't think we could select and switch multiple ones there. But if you're doing a MIDI track, you could, send the MIDI to different instruments from there. So let me know if that makes sense or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see Rick from Bratman Studio joining from Whittier, California. Serial and Cubase. Good combination. All right, we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven. He's just outside my door taking a nap. And to Stella, Mark Raven's dog, and other pets that are nearby. All right, so we see from Jackie Barr, is there an auto pan plugin or feature in Cubase 15 Pro? Just want simple randomizable panning. So yeah, there's a number of ways of doing this. So let's come over to project here. All right, so let's say we have like an acoustic guitar here. All right, and I have this on a stereo track. So if we go to the inserts, so let's go to our spatial panner. I think it might be under, let's see if it's under modulation. So let's go to our auto panner. And I'm gonna put it on the right channel this time, that would help. Right. So under modulation, so our auto panner. So you could adjust this now if you wanted to be random, and you could set the width. Now you could also kind of do this through modulators, is another great approach. So if you wanted to have kind of a random function, so let's say I'm just going to go to the modulators. So if you haven't really dived into the modulators, we could say, okay, just go to random. And what I want to do now is just come over here. I click on the plus symbol, and then I could just go to the panner. We could adjust our speed. And there's different models for randomness. And you could set, okay, I want it to be more pan to the left, pan from the center, as well as more pan to the right. And then I could set the amounts. I want it panned really wide when it does that, or I want it to be very kind of more minimal with its panning. So if I just come here, let's hold down so I can have it in the center. And you hear that panning. So if I want that to be, again, more panned in the right channel, to be heavier in the right panel, we can do that. Or again, so if you want it to be so you can play around with that as well as a modulator. And there's all sorts of different modulators that you could use. So even if you say, okay, I want to apply another modulator to this, you know, we could say, okay, I want to replace it with maybe a morph LFO. So we could have kind of two different LFOs that could be morphed for the panning. So just touch the parameter. So check out the modulators for that. It's a great choice. Or there's, you know, you could use the random functions inside of the auto pan plugin found in the modulation. Okay, so we see from Perceptive Audio, hey Greg, when soloing a pad that has a sidechain compression on it from a kick, the pad loses sidechain. If I solo without soloing the kick as well. All right, so let's set up a quick sidechain pad area. Let's see if I have a project that might set up. And all right, so let's just set up a scenario. We may have side chaining scenario we could set up here. Okay, so let's take a look at our sidechain scenario here. All right. So I'm gonna just set up a quick sidechain compression on this track. So let's go to my compressor, and I want to activate sidechain. Okay, so now we have. All right, but if we solo the synth, we don't have the sidechain enabled because that is being soloed. So let's see if set the output for our kick to be the sidechain here for the synth bass track. Let's see. You could also put this, it seems like that's kind of the same thing. So let me just, this again. Okay, so we had this going to our stereo out. All right, so one thing that you can do is if you hold down like you could put this in the solo safe mode. You could try to hold down the I think it's Alt or Option and click on the solo. So let's say now when I come here, this isn't affected by soloing tracks. This will always be playing regardless of what track is soloed. So you can put it into solo defeat. So when it's not in solo defeat, but now when I click on solo defeat and do my sidechain, that way it's not affected. So try to see what happens if you, again, Alt or Option, click on the solo, and then when soloing, that source will always be present for you there. So if I set this output to no bus also, let's just take a, so now we don't hear it, but we can still have the effect of the side chaining well. But so again, soloing that. So let me know if the solo defeat would work for your workflow. That's from Perceptive Audio. Thanks for the question. All right, so we see from Audi Lee says, great, yes. Thanks, yes, the pan law is the answer. I do simple solution for that. That field jumped on me. All right, we see Brian Sawyer joining from Yuma, Arizona. It's 103 degrees Fahrenheit and cooling down. All right, so we see from Marshmallow 51343. Hi, Greg. Last time I asked you about tempo track to create a mashup of a song. How can I even the tempo curve so the track runs permanently into project BPM? Now the tempo changes permanently. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so import audio file. Okay, so I put my tempo track on. So no correlation between them. Okay, so at this point, what I could do, again, I'm going to do my tempo detection of this. So we're going to start off while it's playing. Okay, so I'm just going to come here. Okay, so we determine what the tempo is, and we can see that our tempo is fluctuating in our particular project here. So we listen to it, sounds like it's the correct tempo track. Okay, it says, and then, so we done that, it says, how can I even a tempo curve so the track runs permanently in the project BPM? So you would select the file or files, go to your audio menu, to advanced, and we want to set definition from tempo. You could save this definition in the project. So this is basically taking all of the metadata from the tempo changes and applying it into the file. So I'm going to hit OK. And so you say, okay, we're roughly, let's see, 120, 128, 117. So let's say I want to do a steady tempo of 122. So now we can just go to your tempo map here and say, okay, I want to do new tempo map. And this tempo map, I want it to be 136. I want it to be 108. And now it's playing back a perfectly steady tempo. So let's say if we go back to our original tempo, I could also, once the tempo track is active, I could take these tempo nodes here and I could compress them. So I could just kind of take my tempo and even it out. So it has little human elements to change. We go back to our original or turn the tempo map off and just type in a steady tempo. So say 122. And now it's fitting perfectly into the project. So select the file or files. You could do this across multiple tracks. Come over to your audio menu to advanced to set definition from tempo. Once the definition from the tempo has been set, then this track is going to automatically follow the project tempo, whatever it is. So you could modify the existing tempo map to put in a retard or an accelerando, or if you wanted to make it perfectly steady or have it drop into another project and assume the other project's tempo, all the track has to be is in musical mode, which this process will automatically place it into musical mode. Let me know if that helped. Gerald Ely says, uh-oh, Mr. Undo checked the attendance sheet. Notice that I'm always late to class. So we're just happy that you made it to class. That's all, Gerald. I hope you're well. So maybe it's raining and you're not playing golf today. But always wonderful to have you on. Okay, so we see from DJ Henke says, is there a situation where track instruments would be more preferable to the rack instruments. Is there benefits to using track instruments instead of rack instruments? These days, I only use rack instruments. So I think, we used to do, kind of like the paradigm of people when we started with VST instruments, and this was, 1999, so 27 years ago. Most people, a lot of composers, people that did a lot of MIDI work, would often have a lot of instruments in a rack. So, and I still have like 23 MIDI modules sitting in a rack near me that hasn't been turned on in many years. But, that was the paradigm. So what Steinberg did is he started off with like a virtual instrument rack. So this was like analogous to a hardware rack that you would have. So when we had MIDI tracks, we would route the MIDI track to the instrument track. And then it would just kind of like the same concept of like, okay, now I add a MIDI track. This MIDI track is going out to my hardware instrument rack, or it's going out to my software VST instrument rack. And that was kind of the paradigm after a while. And then there's a whole new generation of people that never had a hardware rack of instruments. So we had modified it so that when we add an instrument track, that, one, that instead of having a separate MIDI volume from the volume of the instrument, that was consolidated. Instrument tracks were more direct, easier to set up conceptually for people that didn't want to be bound to a hardware rack paradigm. But the initial instrument tracks were limited to one MIDI channel and limited to one stereo output. So then people, as instruments, as computers became more capable and instruments got more complex, people wanted to do multiple instruments on different MIDI channels, and each of those instruments within a single instrument to a separate output for effects processing and mixing. The instrument track was updated so that we could have multi-timbral and multi-outputs within the VST instrument track. I personally have migrated everything over to instrument tracks for my workflow, just because it consolidates. People would have confusion of, I'm adjusting the MIDI volume, but I can't from the MIDI volume fader add reverb. So it kind of consolidated those, where we had separated elements of MIDI from audio. Most of the people, so I think most people have migrated to using instrument tracks because everything is kind of consolidated into, especially for mixing. The few people that I know that are still using instrument racks are people that are using like, VE Pro, like from Vienna Instruments, where they're, going out to maybe a separate instrument, or they're going to instruments that are hosted in a different program on their machine. They used to be really popular, 7 years ago, but I think most people as machines have gotten more capable. I see far fewer people kind of farming out their MIDI to a different host application that's independent of Cubase. That people can do most of all their instruments they want on a single computer, because we have great multi-thread, multi-core support. The processors have gotten so much faster. So the only time that I see people really utilizing MIDI instrument racks is if they're using VE Pro. So I would say maybe in your projects going forward, try an instrument track. And I think it could consolidate workflow. That's a little easier. But I think a lot of times it's going to be for, people that never had the hardware paradigm to model after a workflow. So we kind of give you both options. So let me know if that's helpful, DJ Henke. So I'm in a drop asks, hi Greg, is it possible for our Apache SX to do converge pattern, for instance, a C major 7 to be played as CBEG and so on in different chords? I can only seem to do simple patterns up and down. Thanks. Right, so let's give it a shot here. Okay, so let's say I have. All right, so let's say I'm gonna hold down. Let's open up on this track, like in our patchy. So I'm going to at this point just say, okay, let's go to MIDI inserts. Let's go to your Apache SX. Okay, so I'm going to, at this point, so I'm just holding down, let's say a C major 7 chords, so C, E. I'll add D. So if I come over here, so if I'm holding down the 4 chords, it's the 4 notes in the chord here. So let's say I just hold down E. So let's say I'm doing like a C, E, G, B. So I'm gonna hold down the C note. Then I'm gonna add the E. Now let's add the G. So we're here 3 pitches. Now when I go to the B, so let's say I want to do F, A, C, E. I take away the E, you just hear F, A, C. Take away the C, just F and A, or F and C, F and E. So if I go to C, E, G, B, here are the 4 pitches. So it's really just doing the arpeggio across whatever pitches are present in a particular track. So I'm not sure if that is what your definition of converge pattern. So, you know, if I come over, so let's say I want to take this synth bass part, do, let's say, a C major 7th here. I'll just, okay, so let's say we do C major 7th, and then next bar, I want it to be just a C chord. Let's do an F major 7 followed say by just an F chord. Okay, and I'm going to drag these down to the synth bass part. Okay. And I'll just go ahead and we'll join these together. All right, so this, say, is our, you have these chords laid out for us. I will just quantize. Sorry, all set to. Sorry, I had a wrong grid. Okay, so let's say we have C. Okay, so now that I have these notes here, they're laid out for us. We're going to have those particular notes. So let's look at our part, and we're going to run the arpeggiator on this part. So we'll hear just like this C major. Let me just here. So because we have the 7th presence, now we'll just hear this. You don't hear the 7th. You hear the 7th there. So at that point, so it's just arpeggiating whatever notes is present with the Arpeggi chord, with the Arpeggi plugin. So I'm not sure if, so if you don't have the 7th present, it's not going to add the 7th. If you hold down like a 9th chord, the 11th chord, so whatever notes are being held down is what is arpeggiated. So let me know if that makes sense for you. From I Am in a Drop. So we see, thank you for the answer. Last question. Would Steinberg ever consider to allow Cubase to work with Apple loops? There are so many companies working with that format. Thank you for your help. I'm not sure if Apple loops is an open format or not. There's lots of companies that are doing, loops in Steinberg format as well, or just regular standard WAV files. So I don't know if Apple Loops is actually, if other companies are able to access like the metadata information that's in Apple Loops. So sometimes, some of the stuff is not open, it's available, and so it's kind of unique to a particular program. All right, so we see Soren joining from Sweden. Says he has his leg injury and he's in pain, so we hope your recovery speeds up for you. Sorry to hear that. Right, so we see from John Barry VU says, thanks, tried a few of those things and I found a workaround. I saved as a MIDI loop and created another instance of instrument, drag a MIDI loop onto the event. Now I can render the new instrument. Yeah, I mean, if you have a project if you want to share a project with just like that, if it's just like a MIDI event, if you want to share the project to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it so you could keep everything else out. But if you want to just eliminate all other tracks and just save a project with that one track, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. All right, so we see DJ Henke passing on tips. Says press the L button, the listen button on the channel. You will hear the side chain effect in solo. Give that a try. That's a good tip. All right, so let's say if we have do this, we'll come over. So let's say we have this not soloed. All right, so let's say we have, let me turn off the arpeggiator here. All right, so say if we go to the listen bus, great, just check. So let me just take this off solo. Load. Alright, so let's go activate the listen bus for a channel. Yep. So that's a good tip. I didn't think of that. DJ Hanky, thanks for sharing that. Clever. Okay. All right, we see Mark Rabin on, joining from Montana. Everyone give a big woof to Stella, his dog. Mark Rabin says he's in a paying session, but he wanted to pop in and say woof and say hi to y'all. Return later. Right. Jackie Barr says, is there any way to have inserts displayed as just an alphabetical plugin list instead of grouped into categories? I prefer them to stay under the vendor name, but just an ungrouped list. So I don't think that there's a alphabetical sorting. So let's come over to our VST plugin manager. So let's say if we go to like our VST effects, it looks like by default when we're in, I haven't changed this. So the default settings, let's go to delay and see if these are all in alphabetical order. So when, okay, but you want to do vendor name. So here I have type. Let's go to sort by vendor. So let's say, okay, I want to go to Steinberg. Let's go to the delay plugins. It looks like by default that these are in. I haven't changed these, but these are in alphabetical order by default. So if I come over to modulation, start A, we could see it kind of organized by default alphabetically. So I prefer them to say under vendor name, but then have. Is there any way to have inserts displayed as just an alphabetical plugin list instead of grouped into categories? All right, so let's say if I was making a new category here. Right, so if you don't want it to see it, okay, sorry. So let's make an empty one, make a new collection. We'll call this August 11th, 26. All right, and I'm just going to drag over my files here. So if I drag, so if right now everything that we see here is in alphabetical order. So let me just come over. Right, so I'm going to erase those. So I'm going to select the top. Let's go all the way to the bottom. Hold down Shift, select the bottom, and I drag them over. And now I could have all of my plugins in my system alphabetically organized. And we could save that as your August 11th collection. Let's go back to default. So I can say, okay, I want to come over. Let's sort by category, how I usually have it. Now, if I want to see everything alphabetically, I could just come. And so just select all of the files. All the files will be organized here by name, not necessarily by category, but if you click on name, select the very top one and go to your wah-wah, and then you could drag it over. And as you do that, we can see that the alphabetical order is preserved. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Sorry for misunderstanding at first, Jackie Barr. Great. So Sabertooth Bicycle says happiness is just a click away, and so is that thumbs up icon and a like to saying. Right, so we see from DJ Hankey says, thank you, Greg, for clarification. I thought right, but wrote wrong. I'd only use track instruments now, but today's using rack instruments. Sorry for the confusion from my side. So no problem. So the only time that I see people using a rack instrument is, when using VE Pro. So I don't think you're missing anything. I think it's kind of more of a typical streamlined workflow to be able, I think it's kind of what people expect in a typical workflow now. So no worries about that. So. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. You're joining us. That's witty. All right, we see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. For being online, we have 3/4 of that mess on. Two comments. See 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream from Michael Teams to Gareth. Gareth is getting ready for the solar eclipse. Very visible so much where I'm at this time. All right, let me go to, all right, so I think Mark Rabin had this question from the last live stream of why do my direct outs in the mixer have different colors than what Greg has on his mixer? I think I figured this out for you, Mark. So let's say we have a number of tracks in our mix console, and here I have colors. And what Mark had noticed was that the color of his direct outs were sometimes more pronounced, and like he had some that were more kind of bluish in color. So let's say, once we, if we have it turned off, we could see this color. So I think, Mark, what it's going to be is when we go to your preferences, and Mark was kind enough to send a screenshot to me at clubcubase at steinberg.de. And let's come over to preferences. So we have the mix console channels. So if I had the color strength of the mix console channels, I'm going to hit apply, then okay. So when I open up my mix console and we go to the direct outs, we can see that we have kind of a stronger color when they're disabled. So at this point, I think that's why you may see different colors for that. So check to see if you notice a difference when you go to like your settings, Mark. And so just come over. Let's say if I move this to all the way off for the mix console channel colors. So if I open that up, see that the direct outs aren't going to be colorized. I have mine usually set to 50%. So when I do this, it's not as pronounced, but depending on the color, you may notice that it's going to assume more of that color. But again, if going over here to the preferences, to the settings, if this is kind of cranked up, that depending the color combination with, you can see that as the color strength is higher, that we'll see like those colors kind of carried over into the direct routing when it's being bypassed there. Preferences back to default. check that out, Mark. Great. Reading through comments here. See, that's going to be Gareth's daughter's birthday tomorrow. A happy birthday from everyone on the Club Cubase live streams. Gareth says, incredible. I think it's been 6 years here. Didn't know how long it would last, but still happy to be doing it. All right, John Barry VU just says, hi, Greg, I found a MIDI loop in the right zone media bay, but it is not in the import menu where MIDI files are. Is there any other way to import MIDI loop? All right, so let's say I'll make a MIDI loop here quickly. Take this here. Take this part and listen to it. Current auto pan plugin was. All right, so let's come over here. Let's export this. So a MIDI loop, we discussed this in a previous live stream. MIDI loops are different than MIDI files in that the MIDI loop is actually going to, and it's a proprietary format, that's just going to load into Cubase, and it stores not only the MIDI data, but also the instrument and the instrument settings. So I'm going to go ahead and export the MIDI loop here. So it needs to be an instrument track, and not a MIDI track, but an instrument track with the settings. Go to export our MIDI loop. This very August 11th. Okay, so now let's go to port. See if we can find where it's at. I usually always find it from export to MIDI loop. I think it's always kind of imported directly from the media bay. So if we want to find the MIDI loop, we can come over, take the media bay, and let's go to user content. Let's go to MIDI loops, and I will clear the filters, and we'll see our John Barry. So I think it's just going to be accessed directly from within media bay instead of importing it again. If we want to find it, like where it is in the folder, we could just come over here. Let's So this might go into under MIDI loops. This is on Mac OS Steinberg application support. So it may not be super obvious just to import, But if you want to do it from the right zone media bay, if we come here to media, let's go to your file browser and say, let's go to user content, and then we could see your MIDI loops and we'll see it listed there, and then you can drag and drop. So, but I don't think, since it is kind of, just a part of the media bay and part of it, you don't necessarily import it. It's just going to be something to audition through media bay. Gareth got his daughter a record player for her birthday, and he has to instruct her how a record works. Old school. Oh. I hope that you'll have fun collecting vinyl with her. One of my friends at Steinberg was really into vinyl, and anytime he comes to America, he has to stop by Amoeba Music in Hollywood when he's in Los Angeles for a vinyl searching party. All right, so you see Michael Teams asks, are we able to export FX tracks? Seems I've had problems lately. Okay, let's give it a try. So let's say I have an effects track here. All right, so we have this here. If we can save it as a track preset, let's take a look. Okay, so I want to, let's say, add a track using the track preset. Great. Right, so here's our Teams effects verb. So we could just import it like so. So if you save it as a track preset, that will recall all the settings. I'm going to have this track selected here, excuse me. And then let's export selected tracks. Okay. Let's call this Teams verb. I save this to my desktop. We export selected tracks and we import track archive. Confusing terminology. So let's import our track archive. We'll go to our desktop so we see our Teams reverb XML. Select that. And so we get to open up our inserts on all these tracks, and we'll see that going to be the same. So you can save it as a track preset, or just select that track and export the selected tracks and import track archive. And if that makes sense for you, Michael? Okay, so we see Mark Rabin is back from session. Gareth says that his daughter's already buying records. So she bought Marky Mark. She got was it Good Sensations or Good Vibrations or whatever. His big hit from '92. I used to, my friend Randy Melton played piano on that. So did it at his $25 an hour studio in Norfolk, Virginia, near Old Dominion University, where I did big album project. A lot of the songs you hear me play, I did there in 91, 92. Great. Gareth Stotter's listening to the Beatles, Stones, Stevie Wonder, Jimmy Webb, Mama Cass, and early Cat Stevens. Sounds like a good collection. This Ninja Scared says, are we going to get a dedicated controller for Cubase, something like Lush for Ableton or Motion 16 now for Fender / Presonus? I think we need one. I think Steinberg is, when our hardware was out, is manufactured by Yamaha. Yamaha owns Steinberg, and some of it, like the audio interfaces, were Steinberg branded, and I think it's really Steinberg. We worked closely with Yamaha for integration, so that we had advanced levels of integration between the hardware and software, but all the manufacturing and hardware design was predominantly all the hardware manufacturing, and most of the design, like the software, would be like a joint venture between Yamaha and Steinberg, and like creating the Yamaha Steinberg USB MIDI and USB audio drivers are joint ventures. But now I think the direction we'll see Steinberg is going to be software only. So that we don't have any hardware. And I think most of the Steinberg business model is going to be where it's kind of all digital inventory. And I think that, it makes sense for Yamaha to handle the hardware distribution. And so I think all of the hardware based, Yamaha did release in January or December last year, the Yamaha CC1, which is kind of a single fader device with 12 Stream Deck buttons. So that was something that's tied directly into Cubase. I don't think we will see kind of dedicated Steinberg. Kind of our future business direction will be kind of software only, I imagine. So, but doing the having the MIDI remote, I think the strategy is to be able to take whatever hardware controllers that you have and be able to use those and integrate those deeply within your Cubase environment, utilizing the MIDI remote. So this way, you could use a combination of controllers. So on my desk, I have a CC121 still. I have a Nano control. I have a Nectar Panorama. I have the Choy Sauce designs, 8-channel fader, and I could use all of those. So I think instead of having a dedicated piece of hardware for Steinberg, that it's better to easily integrate all of the functions with the MIDI remote for any hardware. So and it's tricky. Everyone wants a controller, but people tend not to always buy controllers. So if you look at the market, and you look at, if you do analysis of sales, there's different controllers, but they all tend not to sell very well in kind of the grand scheme of things. So I think we'll see Steinberg kind of working better, and you see Steinberg working with like Arturia controllers, working more closely with Native Instruments controllers, working more closely with Novation, where we did, Novation sales promo together. So those types of things, I think we want to be able to work with whatever hardware you have, so you could get kind of a very detailed, a very deeply integrated experience, regardless of what hardware you have. So. Great. Garrett says, "Nice one, Greg. Mark Wahlberg owes you everything." So I wasn't there. It was just the funny story is my friend Randy is just kind of an old school engineer. He had an Atari computer and was a Cubase user for many years. he didn't think that the producer was good for the money, so he made him pay the $250 up front, and then you end up getting like a platinum record from it, but they became good friends after that. So even though he played like the piano solo, it was like his, at that point, people would have drum loops where it's like, okay, these 4 loops work together, these 4 loops work together. There's probably like, 50 other demo projects from students at Old Dominion University doing hip hop tracks that have the same exact drum loop. And it was just that one got picked up and became a hit because of the artist that was involved with it. So, but all that work, and I think my friend got $250 from it, but he was able to get a bunch more studio work afterwards, able to expand his studio. But yeah, you can check out Randy Melton. I think he's in like Williamsburg, Virginia now, plays around Richmond, Virginia. Amazing keyboard player. So he was engineer in some of the tracks I play from the group Cats Courageous that we did together in 91, 92. Okay. All right, so you see Mark Rabin says, Greg, I appreciate you trying to help. I just emailed you a screenshot of the preference. It's set at like 20%. So let me know if I'll take a quick look, but let me know if you adjust that preference, if that color becomes more highlighted. Let's take a quick look at the preference settings here. Thanks for sending it, Mark. I'll use little German parts, figure them out. But if you see that, if that changes, like accentuates the color difference, if you move that all the way up or all the way down. And I think it could also depend on what the active color is as well. But see if you adjust that particular preference, Mark, the color strength there, if that makes a difference for you as well. Thanks for sending this screenshot, Mark. We see Captenergy Music on in Harrisburg. So be up north of Harrisburg this weekend for a wedding. Far from where my father grew up. And Michael Teams is granted Captenergy Music 1 gallon of Neapolitan. All right, so we see Alexander Plasko says Steinberg Houston is the best controller they made in his opinion. Too bad they didn't develop the USB drivers. Works fine on MIDI still to this day. Yeah, so that is a pretty slick controller. I'll tell you an interesting story with that. That was actually developed by Soundcraft. Had manufactured that. At one point, they couldn't really, if you remember back in the 90s, probably like late 90s, when Nokia had like the very popular cell phones, like when everyone had like a Nokia, I think they were called communicators maybe. It was at a certain point, the glue for the buttons, like for the transport buttons, were all used this one particular glue, and it was the same one that Nokia used. And then Nokia bought like a 2-year worldwide supply of the glue, and they weren't able to continue manufacturing the Houston. Interesting global economy type of thing. Great. Great. So we see from John Barry, says he got Rasta and XTC in the sale. They both really benefit from scaling. to Alexander Plasko and everything about Steinberg Houston. They were going to just not include it as support anymore, and I argued so that we could still have people that are using Houston to this day still work with it over MIDI. Jazz Dude posted about the Steinberg VST sales. So I think Hallion is 60% off and a lot of other instruments. So take advantage of that. See from Gareth, there's a lot of smoke in Spain, and Mark Rabin's probably having a lot from Spokane that's sneaking over. Saw a snapshot, a friend of mine, Yamaha sales rep in the Pacific Northwest, where kind of pasted a picture from airplanes where you can see all the smoke over Pacific Northwest. It's pretty intense. Let's see, DJ Henke says, what is your first memory of Cubase? I came in contact with Cubase in 1994 and got a copy of Cubase 1.0 for Atari. MIDI owned. What a hassle. So the first time I saw Cubase, when I was in college, I remember looking at the notator in Cubase, and I thought, brochures, when you used to have brochures for software, and I thought that the project window in Cubase is much better. And then my friend Wayne and I, and Wayne, he's the one who sings in that, the one kind of country sounding song I use. We went up to New York City for the Audio Engineering Society show, and I got to, and we found our way to 48th Street, which is where all the music stores in New York were, like Sam Ash and Manny's. And while we're in Manny's, I was asking to see Cubase because they had an Atari set up there. And then at that time, it was the local rep in New York at the time, started showing me some Cubase stuff. And at that point, also, 3 guys came in. One was named Bill Black. He used to do tech support at Steinberg when I started. He started showing me some Cubase stuff. The distributor at the time was there named Russ Jones. And one of the developers, Wolfgang Kundras, was also there. And they all gave me kind of a Cubase demo in Manny's. And then I bought it a couple days after that. And then ended up like 5 months later working for Russ. So that was my first Cubase experience. So started on version 2 when it was out. So it was a good decision to skip my college classes that day to go up to AES. Thank Michael Finlayson, his wife Lyda, who allowed us to stay at their house while we're doing the show in New York. Michael, who sadly passed away last year, he was on the live streams quite a bit. So really dear friend. So Jazz, you just mentioning how the full version is a good deal and lots of extra stuff is included. Alexander Plasko says, Greg, wasn't cheap, $1,100. I have it on a roll around stand. So I have it in my storage closet for space, but I have probably the same roll around stand that you do too, but still a great controller. Right, Michael Teams says, think about Hallion 7.5. What do you think, Greg Jazz? So if you're playing back mostly like, pre-existing libraries, like I know you have the Rasta, and if you, wanted to use libraries that are existing, you could play all of those in Hallion Sonic, and Hallion is really excels at if you're doing sound design work. So if you want to create your own instruments and you want to make like really ethereal atmospheres, you want to, get to the point when you're, creating instruments where you make the knobs and, build the instruments from the foundation of combining, synthesis, and again, you have multiple forms of synthesis within Hallion and samples together. So if you're really into developing your own sounds, one like really power Hallian user is kind of the really highly regarded TV composer Danny Lux, who probably he may be like second or third for a number of broadcast hours that he's composed for. And for him, he just loved Hallian because, one, he just started making sounds in it. And then, with Hallian 5, or I think it was Hallian 6 came out, where you could actually, might have been Hallian 5, where you could actually build your own VST instruments. You could now, so Danny has kind of almost a second career of building VST instruments. So if you check out, Danny Lux's, and they're like patches that he uses on his TV shows constantly. But again, you could kind of just start off with, okay, I want to start off with an analog synth. I got my oscillators, and then how do I build? And now I want to make a knob that does, just kind of like as we do inside of, Retrolog, say, oh, what kind of oscillator do I want? I want a triangle wave here. I want to adjust a level. I want this level down. I want to be able to, come over and say, okay, let's do fine tuning on this oscillator so that, and then you want to come over, let's add a filter. So what type of filter do we want? I want a classic filter. So and then I want to be able to come over here and let's do an envelope section. I want to be able to have an LFO so that when I want to, have different controls, so you could just kind of build your own instruments. So I would say if you just want to take instruments that people have built, which is perfectly viable, then Hallian Sonic is great. If you want to design your own instruments, and really just about, you have spectral, virtual analog, FM synthesis, organ synthesis, so all sorts, and also granular synthesis. So many forms of synthesis, like when you first start off. So if you're really into kind of making your own sounds, you could do all sorts of amazing like sound design work. Some people just want to get presets, and you can play those in Hallian or Hallian Sonic. So I would say if you're not interested in designing your own sounds, then probably Hallian Sonic is fine. You do get a great additional library of the Sonic Selection library with Hallian, so you get additional sounds as well and instruments. So. Adam Langford just saying it's a steal at the price. So. Jazzy is just saying it's only about $35 to $40 difference. Isn't it like 2 burritos or a big pizza in the U.S.? So maybe 1 pizza delivered. Yeah. Okay. All right, so Mark Ravens got his session all done. His project files are up, and he's wrapped up, and he's present. All right, John Barry VU just says, hi Greg, new XTC allows you to drag a SysX Juno file into the XTC, but on my Windows 3 screen, as soon as I set it up, I grabbed the file from Explorer window. The VST instruments disappear, so I can't drag. Great, so let me just... have the XTC installed. If you want, John, if you have the SysX that, if you have the SysX file that you want to email to me, I'd be happy to, give it a shot. See if I could get the XTC downloaded here. Bear with me just for a second. One second, see if I can get the XTC here. Into another computer. Get this. But yeah, if you want to email me the sysx file as an attachment, I'd be happy to take a look at it and see if we could figure out. One second, see if I can get it. Two-factor authentication. Go ahead. Take my license. Great. Refresh my media bay. But yeah, so John, if you want to email me that, I'd be happy to. Get that going for you. So you see Gerald Ely says he has a full Hallion, but after your promo, the Danny Lux bundle has caught my eye. Yeah, so if you're not familiar with Danny, like probably the show that he, is most well known for is Grey's Anatomy. I think it's like 21 years or something now. And I remember when he started it, he was just like, "Oh man, it's not Desperate Housewives, but it's a pretty good show, you know." And not knowing that Desperate Housewives would last like 4 seasons. He's on year 21, so been incredibly successful, but incredibly talented and very, very diligent, hardworking guy. Great. So we see from Mark Rabin, is it okay to compress folders with .tar or targz for audio folders like Untitled 01, not the audio mixdown, edits, auto saves, trying to save disk space. If you have audio files that aren't being utilized in the project and you're trying to save disk space, one of the things you could do is just, come over to, your media bay or media menu and choose to remove unused media. And from the unused media at that point, you could, get rid of audio files that aren't active in the project. So you could do that. I think as long as it's a lossless compression, decompression, I don't think you'd have any problems using, .tar or zip file. I think you'd be fine. Okay, so John Barry says he'll send it over. Okay, so you see from Bears Karate, hi, where is racks on the mixer page? How to open direct routing and QSends on the mixer. Thanks. All right, so verify my Microsoft Office programs live stream. All right, so when you go to the mixer, you may notice that racks are only going to be available if you have, so when you right click on an area, you'll see a setup sections. So here you could have a hardware setting and that could be the racks. But here you could say, okay, I want to see my QSends and direct routing. They may not be on by default, but you can just come right over here, right click on a section such as inserts or strip or send. And as we come over here, go to the setup sections, and then you could just activate those right there. So if, let's say, if I come over here and I have just go to my audio connections. So if you have like Yamaha hardware or Steinberg hardware, we go to, let's say, our inputs tab. So let's say I want this to be connected to my Yard 24C. Right, so now that I have these defined, then we could see kind of like your hardware settings. So here we could actually have and control the onboard DSP for the hardware. So if you want to open up like the onboard RevX reverb, or if you wanted to use like the morphing channel strip plugin, you could have compression and EQ and morph between different settings that's powered by the DSP that would show up kind of in the racks or the hardware section. So if you don't have that hardware, it may not show up because it doesn't have the advanced integration. But if you right click again, go up to setup sections, at this point, you could activate other sections or hide sections that you want to see visible or to be hidden in the mixer. So wondering if anyone's tried the new AKG C series mic. Great. So we see from Mark Graben, says, Greg, it's my archive on external drive. I just have a ton of project folders, some titled, some not. Just curious if best compression format to use. I think, I haven't compared, compression. I think, most of the time these days, like, zip files are pretty universal and are, addressable through Mac and Windows operating system by default. So that's always a good format. I'm not sure if .tar files are, have a higher compression ratio or not. So, but I think, as long as it, in 30, Mark, you've probably been working with computers where, in the 90s, you may not have trusted a zip file to fully unzip correctly. But I don't think we have to worry about that today. So, and see Adam Langford just recommending 7-zip are the best compression. So Gareth is saying .rar files work as well. All right, so we see Bratman Studio. Greg, wasn't Logic an offshoot from Cubase? Something about two brothers had a falling out. Did I hear that right? So at one point, Gerhard Lingling, before it used to be C-Lab, which turned into eMagic, which then was acquired by Apple. So initially, I think that the very first, initially, like Gerhard, the story I heard was that he had worked on he worked on like maybe an editor librarian, and I could be mistaken about this. I heard this kind of third hand. But Manfred Rurup, who's like, one of the founders of Steinberg, if you go to DAW Bench, he did an interview recently, and he was kind of speaking about this and got asked a question. So at one point, very early on, Gerhard, I believe, is trained as a dentist. Was involved in a project at Steinberg, and maybe got irritated at something and then started his own company of C-Lab. So I think he was involved with the Steinberg project initially. So it's interesting, kind of tangentially, how people from Steinberg have, even people that worked in the U.S. distribution office with me have all gone on to do really wonderful, great things in the industry, and other people from the industry, there's kind of a common Steinberg thread. Steinberg is like really, kind of the visionary, legendary company that really kind of started a lot of music, companies and offshoots from Steinberg. So like the people that started Propeller Heads, which is Reason Studios, they used to write the manuals for Steinberg when I started years ago. Obviously, there were a few people that left who went on to start, PreSonus, which is now Fender Studio Pro. Gerhard was originally involved with Steinberg products before starting with that. So before starting eMagic and C-Lab. So I think it was C-Lab, and then he had kind of like a business divorce with like the distribution partner, and then they became eMagic. So a lot of people, if you look at, where my former colleagues have, like TC Electronics had TC Works, which did like the power core and did a number of plugins that was headed up by an ex-Steinberg person. So, Steinberg is really kind of almost like the cradle of a lot of software innovations, and people have gone on to do many, many other things in the industry. So it's, it's fascinating to watch all these other people, and move on and do wonderful things in the industry. And I'm still doing the same job, but I'm happy to still be involved with Steinberg directly. And there's people at Steinberg who've been there, maybe a half dozen people have been there longer than my 34.5-year tenure. So it was very, very tangentially kind of connected. But you could check out, and I encourage everyone to, if you go to like the DAW Bench podcast, it's a great interview with Manfred Rurup. So check that out. You can learn a lot about kind of early Steinberg stuff. So. All right, so we see from Smiling Sound Productions, hi Greg, my recorded instrument track notes are delayed on playback in the editor, not while recording. Never had this issue before. Any idea how to fix it? Greetings, it's Pete, Amsterdam. Okay, so they're delayed on playback in the editor, not while recording. So let me know if when you're looking at the MIDI information, if it is, so if you're looking at the MIDI information, if it seems like it's playing on the beat, but it's playing back visually than what you see. So like while you see it playing here, like, you see it like, okay, this note should be starting as we play, but that is being delayed. Or if visually it's lining up and it's out of time. So sometimes when we go to like your studio setup, let's get to like the audio system, check to make sure. You may see like the advanced options here, but there are some like record shift. So, that I think, let's take a look at like MIDI port setup, and let me know if you, if it's for a particular controller, if it's for MIDI that's going to a virtual instrument, MIDI is going to a hardware instrument. That information would be like really helpful for me. Okay, it says recorded instrument track notes delayed on playback. Also, check to make sure, another thing that it could be, there is a track delay setting that you can set here in milliseconds. So if you, have this set up, sometimes people experiment with that. So on a MIDI track, you could do pre-delays or post-delays as well. So if you could let me know if it's, if it's, when you listen to the part, if it's visually off, but it looks like it's playing in time here, or if the part is off in time. That would be, I would say if the part is like when you're recording it, but it's being captured and it's, when you do that, then it could be like a MIDI driver. Like sometimes if you're on Windows, you may have like, different generations of drivers for like, MME versus, and on the Windows platform, when you go here to your studio setup, your MIDI port setup, you may see some different options on Windows for like, like use WinRT MIDI. So you'll have some different options and see if any of those make a difference as well. Your comments. Discussion of RAR versus ZIP. We see Jazz Dude just mentioning that stealing know-how from your former employee is a decent crime and easy to punish in Germany. Yeah, I think a lot of software, early music software, was a bit more rock and roll in those days and not so corporate. So. All right, so we see from Bradman Studios, says Greg Red Beans recording. Did a history of VST, very interesting. Lots of Cubase Steinberg history in the video. So yeah, I'll have to check that out. I don't think I've seen. I was reading an interview with Yvonne, one of the Steinberg developers and developer for Softtube and Waves, about VST and VST3. That was really interesting. That last night. Yeah, it's amazing. VST is now 30 years old. So I remember like reading faxes about it as it was being kind of reintroduced to us in the market. So it's a very exciting time. You see Sabertooth Bicycle says, thanks for sharing the Steinberg history and your own beginnings with Cubase. I'm looking forward to diving deeper into that. Creativity and innovation. Yeah, Steinberg has just always been just really, so I've been able to have a wonderful life because of Steinberg. Michael T says, started Cubase 4 Pro, still going strong. Get your loyalty. Here we see DJ Henke has to be taking off. So have a great evening to everyone. Checking out from over and out from Stockholm. Great. Rick from Bratman Studios, as he saw his DAT machines in his closet, dual cassette and 80s, 90s Korg instrument. All right, so we see Nacho Gonzalez Napa says, does anyone know if you could use a UF1 with Cubase and manage a big template without having to load plug-in into each track? So I think the UF1, you still have to run, like, was it the SSL 360? I think you do need to run that is for the UF1 to function, but you could probably also create a MIDI remote map of it, and then you wouldn't have to use the particular plugin. So, so you should see if there's like the ability of running the UF1 without that. But if it's just going to be transmitting MIDI information that can be captured, there may be MIDI remote maps already available for Cubase, so that you don't have to utilize the plugin for that. But I think that's how a lot of the control surfaces work, so they could work across different platforms. I'm not a huge fan of that personally, because I don't want a plug-in slot being taken away just to run a controller if there's other ways to do it that's more directly interactive. Michael Teams is countering Rick's legacy equipment with the Yamaha MT1. I think it was an MT4 4-track and 2-inch reels of tape on itself. See, Jazzy says Steinberg is very generous to their ex-employees. It's Charlie Steinberg. Yeah, Charlie's just very smart incredibly gracious human. So I just wish I had the ability to spend more time with Charlie, but seems to be enjoying retirement and still working on products like VST Live. See John Costigan just mentioning to Michael Teams that about saving. Just says, just note about the effects channel migration, saving the track preset makes all your track presets retrievable from one space independently. As you just saying that Charlie Steinberg was a hippie back then. So there's some great interviews with him in German. So I'll check some of those out and see if I can get them translated. All right. So we see Mark Raven just says, is this a new thing? No Friday streams? Said no, I think it's just as I have a wedding I'm going to be going to this weekend. So, and in September, I may miss a few live streams. I'll be going out to Steinberg. I'll see if I could maybe do one live stream from Steinberg if schedule permits, but I'll be going out to Hamburg, my first time in 7 years, on September 1st. So we may miss like a week and a half of live streams in September because I'll be traveling. So we see Nacho Gonzalez Napa will make research if anyone knows any tutorials to set up what Greg mentioned. Highly appreciate it. So let me brush my mouth. Okay. Yeah, so see, I would take a look. There's kind of a MIDI remote depository that's on the Steinberg forums and see if someone has made one. As long as it if you hook it up without any software and it transmits MIDI, you can create just a MIDI remote script, in a couple minutes and, kind of make a virtual version of the controller. Yeah, so we see from Bratman Studios, this is Greg, when you go to Germany for your meeting, say hi to Charlie from all of us Cubase Nation fans of the stream. I don't think he's living in Hamburg anymore. I'm not absolutely sure, but someone mentioned to me that he's like a few hours out of Hamburg now. But I think I'm going to get together with some friends and try to get together with a meal with Manfred while I'm out. Usually there's a few kind of older employees that are, always will be dear friends. So I'm looking forward to catching up with some past and a lot of current Steinberg employees, but I'll pass on the sentiment to other people. So we see Tiago joining from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. See Jazz Dude posted a German interview. Brian Sawyers just says maybe you could do a live from Hamburg stream. So I may try to see. I think they have like a studio set up, and I'd see if they have kind of the equipment that I could use for a live stream. But we'll reach out and see if we could do that. I think it would be a lot of fun to. I know they have a couple of different studios, and I think they have like a streaming studio at the Hamburg office. But I think it would be like 7 to 11 p.m. in Hamburg. I'm not sure if the office would be open at all, but I'll see if I could do a live stream from Hamburg, maybe with some guests. That would be a lot of fun. All right, Danielle Solomon says, hi Greg, can you demonstrate a little working with Tonalic? there seems to be a lot of glitches, especially on 6/8 kind of tempos. Yeah, let's give a start. So a lot of the tempos, a lot of the content may be 4/4 based, but let's take a look at utilizing tonalic. And this is from Solomoni Systems. People do Melodyne. So I'll come over here. Let's start with tonalic. So I'm going to go to the tonalic tab over here. So we could search for different musicians if we want. We could also just kind of click here. Let's say, okay, I want to do drums. Okay. So I'm looking maybe for blues. Let's do basic, and we have kind of, so we get audition. All right, so I'm going to drag that over to my project. All right, so now I'm just going to just set this to bars and beats. All right, so let's say I have some basic drums starting here. All right, so let's say I'm looking for like some blues stuff, so I'm going to just go back here. Let's look for a bass part. So I want to fret it bass, maybe blues oriented, so I get different phrases here. So you see that's the one that we use. Let's do something a little more creative. And you could also say, okay, I'm looking for more arpeggio stuff. I want something. So let's drag this out. All right, so let's say I want 2 measures of drums, and then we'll have our bass come in. Great, so we'll have that. So we'll start off. So I think the concept with tonalic is it's real musicians, it's not necessarily MIDI oriented. Now, if I double click here, we could go into and find out kind of more information. So, okay, this is our bass player. We could also come up with like transitions. So let's say I want to delete this. I want to have maybe a variation. So let's do maybe a transition here. All right, so now I could take that. So we're just moving kind of these little chunks like this. Let's duplicate this one. So I'm going to roll back, measure. Let's take this now. All right, so we have drums. We see our bass come in. So now we'll have this in the transition. All right, so let's say we want to go to our drums, and now I could say, okay, we have this. Let's do maybe a variation. And we could also have these just kind of follow our chord track. So let's say if I have a chord track to start with, that would be helpful. All right, so let's say, okay, I want this to be an E. Major, and let's say when we go here, let's go to our 4 chord. So we will come back here to the bass part, and let's say now we want to do maybe that there, and let's put this here. All right, so we're going to start off in the key of E. Have a bass variation here. It's going to switch to an A chord with different parts. And let's say we want to add a guitar part. So at this point, so the concept is, again, that you could just have kind of real musicians, and then they would kind of dynamically follow, what you're playing. So let's say, okay, we want to do maybe a country rock kind of thing. Now let's take a listen. So now we could. All right, so maybe that guitar doesn't work, but you could just kind of take your different parts. Let's look for, a rhythm part. Let's do a guitar. So you could. That may be a better fit for this song. So you can listen to this. So and let's say we want electric guitar. So we will come over and just search. Okay, we want guitar. So let's say, okay, maybe we'll. So again, you could just kind of come over and pick lots of different elements and be able to kind of build up. And then if you say, okay, when I get here, I want to, just kind of change this, like this bass part that comes up here. I can just come over here. Then we could just choose to kind of edit like the individual notes if we wanted to. So like say, now we listen to this bass part. So I could just kind of select and change the pitch of the notes. Or we do that, so I've wanted variations. So while it's an audio performance, you can come over and just find, different. This sound. So you could just kind of play around, but think of it like having different session musicians. So not all of the different elements may not work in 9/8 or 6/8. So you kind of deal, you can come in and edit individual parts kind of in a similar manner to MIDI, not the same flexibility, but it will automatically follow your chord track. So if I say, okay, here I want it to go to a B chord, let's say B7, that we could just have your drums. So we're in E. Then we go to say, okay, let's just resolve it down to E here. So then utilizing chord track. So these audio parts will automatically fit to adapt in with the chord progression. So that's how you can kind of start working with tonalic inside of Cubase. Spot. Okay, so Mark Raven says, I got a dumb question. I forgot how to show the control on the track to see multiple takes. So if you right click, it's going to be under track control settings. See if you have lane display type. And then once we go to your lane display type, that point, you'll see this icon, which will be the show lane. So if you have that icon, if it's visible, click right there, and that will show all your different takes that are like stacked tracks on a particular track. My log files, I remember Cubase 4 or 5. All right, so we see from Daniel Solomon just says thank you. All right, so you see from Rick asks, Greg, I'm looking at your Korg Nano control. I see buttons that make sense. Then blank button, how do you know which is which? I get the tape controls and QC, but blank buttons. All right, so let's say I go to my Nano control, so I get to my MIDI remote. So these, and over like the live streams, so here I could have these as quick controls, but if you just double click, you could assign functions here. So let's say, okay, I want to, lock a track or whatever. So we can come over and just say, okay, I want to, let's say, write automation on this track. I could say MIDI remote pickup for remote automation. And then I could touch a button and then apply the mapping. And now once that function has something assigned to it, we could see that it may translate to icon, but so it could be like these. I don't have anything assigned. So usually I have kind of like a live stream set up so I could kind of add functions easily here. But really all you had to do, so once you have these functions assigned to something, so if you just go say, okay, I want my transport to fast forward, see that there will be an icon. I could say the apply mapping. Then we look at it and we can see that that fast forward icon or freeze tracks will just be positioned visually over. So just these, I don't have a function assigned to them. Raven just wondering when anyone's heard from Michael Pierce. So yeah, it's been a while. Maybe he's been busy with sessions. The Rick from Bratman Series says, yeah, we like that guy. He's solid and makes soup. Guys, dudes, on top of it, sharing Charlie Steinberg interviews. YouTube. All right. So we see, Greg, what is the best way to move all track settings, one project to another? I did a live recording in one session, split it up into different tracks, got all the settings right for one. Okay, so there's probably a couple of different ways. So let's say if I go over to this project. Right. So I think if it's going to be like for live recording, if it's all audio, what I would do, so let's say we have this, and let's say we're happy with the settings. I could come over here. Let's just say, okay, I want to take all of these audio tracks. And I think if we over here to settings, we could say save selected channels. We'll say barn door mix, and I'll just save it to my desktop. All right, so let's say I've now set all of these and I want to carry this over. So I will come over, let's put in absolute mode, put a quick link. Now, okay, so let's say I've kind of destroyed my mix now at this point. So I'm going to go to my settings and let's say load selected channels. So, and come right over here, hit open, and then our mix will be applied other one. So that's one way. You could also come over here. So let's say, if the tracks are pretty similar, like if it's a live thing where you have basically the same tracks going across multiple songs, another approach is to, let's come over here. I'm going to import, not an audio file, but so let's say I want to come over here. I have a new project. Right. So let's say I want to import tracks from a project. We'll do a new project here. That our new folder. So let's import tracks from a project. So let's say, okay, I want to take that Amos Moses project here. Faithful project from. And then I'm going to not insert events and parts. So now I have this, if I really do it correctly this time, sorry about that. So come over here. So I see this, I'm going to select all the tracks, but not insert or import the events and tracks. So do that. Let me do one more time. Okay, so let's import the tracks from the project again. Better this time. Select all, uncheck events and parts. Like that. Checked. Different version. All right, so I'll come here. So uncheck this, we'll select all. All right, so here, so I don't have those particular plugins, but now I have all of the particular tracks here. So all of my mixer settings are preserved. So when we go to look at our mix here, we can see that, we have our mix has been preserved. So we've imported, let's say we save the file that we want. Then we could just import, let's say, tracks from a project again. And I will just do a quick, like a variation here. And you'll notice that we could say, okay, we could just say that we have kick, and I could create a new track, or we could say select matching track. So I'm going to say select all and select the matching track. And if you have kind of like the same recordings, then all of the other tracks, you can immediately put them onto the track that you like, the one good one that you have. They're like, oh, this is the mix. I want this to be like the starting off point for everything else. Then you could say, okay, I want to import the events and parts, and you could select the matching track. And then as you say this, the track that was labeled kick in our, say 1 hour live recording, then I broke it down to different sections, automatically put that track into the kick track, or you could choose to override that or put it into a new track. But this way, everything, if you do the import, select all, and then select matching, if the tracks are all aligned and you want to get it into like your mix template, just, save it as, import without any of the parts. Then you could save it as a template and then start the project and import the selected tracks. You want import the project from the other project that you want. You can select all. You could do the select matching so that, your Tom 1 track goes to your Tom 1, Tom 2 goes to Tom 2, and then import the events and parts. And then you could have one kind of mix template and have all the other events just kind of line up to it. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Lawrence. Great to see you on. Okay. Mark Raven just says you guys are all amazing. Love your questions. Your intrigue has helped me learn. Thank you. Gareth says Nick has been around recently. Yeah, so Nick popped in. He actually popped into the Zoom social at the end of July, so been popping in a little more. Gareth says there's a total feature set I had no idea about. gave Gareth revelation of the day. Not sure what the feature was, but nice to be able to do that. Gareth just says it's like a book club meeting or an ancient bikers convention. Club there. Mark Rabin just asked Greg, what are you working on musically at the moment? So I haven't been really doing too much, just kind of been working. I will be kind of I play in a local symphony, the Washington Metropolitan Philharmonic. So that season will be starting in I think our first concert of the season is going to be October 4th. So we have rehearsals, I think, starting September 23rd. So I'll be getting up to speed on that. But that's probably my musical project that I'll be working on coming up, just enjoying summer, my family. Great to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. All right, so we see from Rick, he has a question that says, maybe ask you this, but with Tenalic, you have to restart in 32-bit and then 64-bit. What does that mean to your performance? Are there aspects of Cubase? So for Tenalic to do the preview, and the very first time I did on my Mac, I didn't have this set correctly, so the preview wasn't working. But when you go to your audio system, there's a processing precision. So you could do 64-bit or 32-bit float. So most of the time, if you're a golden ear engineer or golden ear mastering person, a lot of the processing that's being done internally is going to be 64-bit floating point. It may not be apparent, and you could try it for yourself to switch to turn off 32-bit or 64-bit processing precision to see if you hear it. My golden-eared mastering engineer friend, Greg Lukens, he immediately, I gave him at one point a file that, where I did the same project and exported it as 32-bit and exported it as 64-bit float and said, these two files, tell me about them. And he picked out the 64-bit as being a higher quality. And he has Meyer XD1s or the $85,000 a speaker, speakers in his mastering room, and he has amazing ears. So this doesn't really affect memory. We have 32-bit memory addressing, 64-bit memory addressing. This is more of the processing precision. So a lot of people may not hear the difference, but if you switch it to 64-bit for your processing precision, you don't get the preview for Tenalic. It has to be in 32-bit. So I'm not sure if that's changing or what causes that. But if you can't preview, then switch to 32-bit. Once the project is in, everything works except for the previewing. Once you get the data in, you could switch it back to 64-bit for exporting and mixing if you need to. John Costigan just says, just a reminder, if you marry more than one person at a time, it's called bigamy. All right. I like my one wife. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says, Greg, that's huge. Do you compose now? So I was never really a songwriter or composer. When I did more studio stuff, I was always kind of more the producer and did mixing and programming. But I'm not one to come up with the initial idea, but I could take someone's initial idea and kind of craft it and polish it and do stuff. So, but primarily, with the orchestra, I'm just doing symphonic performances. And I think there's, if you go to the Washington Metropolitan Philharmonic, you could see some of the YouTube videos of some of our performances. They just posted some. Great. Okay, so we see from Bob Skeleton X, said, Greg, I have an audio event with wildly different audio volume levels. Is there a one-click fix? I tried normalize and compression, but I like to change the wave, not via inserts. Thanks. All right, so let's just take an example here. Project open. Great, so let's say have this acoustic guitar part here. All right, so let's say I have this file here, and I'll bounce it quickly here, so it's going to be one contiguous file. Okay, so let's see. You said you tried normalize. Like a one-click solution. So let's see if what happens when we normalize, if that pops up. Yeah, so it's going to do kind of peak levels. Try. Happens if you do just a quick washer. So if you have something that's very kind of disparate like that, if you normalize, it's going to be normalizing based on kind of like the peak levels generally. So you might have to, manually, there could be like auto plugins to do this, but you could probably also just come here, be able to select just a region. And if you go to the top center, you could just kind of bring up those areas. So it's not a one button fix, but you could do clip gain change pretty easily. So just kind of selecting that region, go to the top center, and then just bring it up. It's not too hateful. You could try to compress it, but it may not do, if it's depending on the extremes of the difference in volumes, you may have a hard time getting it. But I would probably, how I would do it is probably approach it like that, because then you could hear it and get you could probably get, a good chunk of the way there just visually doing it and then tweaking. Raven's just saying, thank you, Greg, for all you do. So always glad to help. Okay, my Logify says I met a guy from Washington, D.C., piano player called Mr. Piano Carlton. I wonder if that's on his birth certificate, if that's his government name. Lives in downtown Washington. Don't know him. Okay, so you see Michael Teams has to take off. So thanks for joining us, Michael. Let me go to some more questions that were mailed in. All right, so we see says this weekend I started to control my Hammond SK2 through MIDI. Digging into MIDI isn't completely new for me, but due to the use of VST instruments, I stopped with hardware connections. Now I'm back because I want to live play the Hammond and record it as audio, but parallel. I want to record the MIDI just to have some backup when one or two notes are played wrong. Changing that within MIDI data seems more logical for me than changing it with Very Audio, but maybe you could show the best approach. It says after changing one or two MIDI notes, I left the MIDI part play and record the audio input, but some dynamics are missing. For example, expression pedal, which makes a Hammond sound as Hammond can see the automation is captured but reversed. It's hard to get it working. So usually it's going to be whatever is playing back in MIDI will be captured as audio. So let me just add an instrument track here. Do it in Hallian 7. All right, so let's say get to advanced. Let's go over here to our Model C. Right, so let's say, all right, so when I move my mod wheel up, we get kind of the Leslie kicking in. All right, so let's go ahead and just record something here. So I think it makes sense to record it as MIDI and as audio simultaneously. So let's say we'll just call this our Hallian organ. Okay, so, and I'm going to just add an audio track here. And we will say, okay, I want I'm gonna add an audio track, not an instrument track, sorry. Add an audio track. Okay, so let's go to our audio track and its input. I'm going to set it from the VST instruments. So here, I think we'll have our Hallian organ. Added that. All right, so what I want to do, I'm going to put both of these into record. We'll just solo both of these other parts. So if I'm playing, I will hit record and so I'll take it out of loop. So now we recorded this simultaneously as audio and MIDI. So let's say I'm listening to this, and now I go into my MIDI editor. All right, so let's say I change some notes here in MIDI. So I want to take these notes. All right, so now if we play this and the audio simultaneously, we're going to hear the change. So we have changes. So if I wanted to do this again, so usually, now what sometimes, if you're overdubbing, like let's say I come here, there's a MIDI record mode. So if you're like overdubbing, like let's say the Leslie effect, like you may put this on merge, and as you record, so now I've recorded a bunch of extra like modulation wheels. So if you're, once you're doing that, I would, when you say it's reversed, I'm not sure. Sometimes I've seen pedals be reversed as well. Like sustain pedals where you press it down, it stops sustaining, you let go, it sustains. So depending on your controller, like the polarity may be reversed. A lot of them are auto sensing. So if you have a pedal that's reversed, it could also be that, turn off the instrument, hold down the pedal and turn it on, and it will actively sense. So to see if the sustain pedal, but if I've changed the MIDI, I would just again come over here. Let's set my left and right locators around that event, and I need to re-record the audio. I'll come right over here. We'll arm the audio track and hit record. So I'm not sure if, but I would, if you have the ability, so VST instruments, you could do that. If it's a, real external instrument, you have to connect it into the audio inputs, make sure that you're recording it. If it sounds different, make sure you're recording it as stereo. Sometimes people record it as mono and then, it sounds different, but it shouldn't really sound different from like what you have on the MIDI playback. That should be just being captured. Make sure there's no like effects on the channel, or if you have EQs on the channel. So like when you go to playback, if there's like, big EQ curve, it may not sound the same. So as we listen to it. So, if there's EQ changes on there, that may have an impact overall. So it's like, okay, we have a nasty EQ curve like that. But it should be capturing exactly what you're hearing. So check, see if your audio interface, if there's any plugins or DSP in your audio interface, but it should be able to be captured the same way. All right, so now our question, so we have, what is the purpose of these knobs where it says none, project, and track? All right, so we'll see this on the routing page in MIDI. So these are the input transformers. All right, so when you click here, it's these knobs that we see. So we see none, project, track. So what an input transformer, we could have this would allow you to take MIDI information and on the way in, like you could transform it in some way. So let's say, it could be if if you're noticing changes, try to set this to none, because you could do stuff in a transformer. So you could have the input transformer on the project level or just at the track level. So you could change it here and you're like, okay, I didn't see anything happen, and you may not see what it's doing until it opens the panel. So here I could say we could have presets. So let's say my modulation wheel controls the Leslie effect, and I'm using that, but it doesn't seem to be coming in MIDI. It's not recording it. So, it could be that you're filtering out MIDI, we'll say is equal to a MIDI controller. And as we do this, the MIDI controller value we'll say our subtype, is we're filtering out, when we move the modulation wheel, Cubase through this input transformer on the track or globally can now filter out these MIDI messages. So if the input transformer is turned on and there's presets, and there's a number of presets, that could be like affecting the MIDI information that is being recorded. So that could be saying, okay, only record these particular notes, or anything that has a velocity less than 60, filter those notes out and they won't be captured in MIDI. So that's what these three things do. So if you're noticing a sound from what you play in the audio in MIDI, and then all of a sudden it's like, if you're saying, at one point you said the pedal seems reversed, like the expression pedal, make sure that you don't have the input transformer on, because that could change the incoming MIDI information. So when we see this, and again, you'll see it on the routing tab, we could have none. You could have it globally on the project. So if your MIDI controller is always spitting out like gobs of MIDI aftertouch information that you don't want, and you could, at the project level, say filter out aftertouch, or you could just do it at the track level here. So that is what the MIDI input transformer. So check the MIDI input transformer and make sure you don't have any presets open, because that could affect the sound of MIDI organs from your Hammond SK2 to it accurately being, transferred as audio. All right, so we had a question. I think this is a Michael Team's question about the Rasta synth with the giant leap preset. So let's take a look at that. And this person had a support ticket in and they wanted to share that. So they said that that particular preset, Michael Teams said that one preset wasn't playing back as expected. Giant leap. Right. And so when we go to playback this particular instrument, so he's saying that it's going to be like a portamento setting. Let me just read this real quick for the benefit of others. It says it has something to do with the portamento control. So let me just see if it's when we're playing this sound. Let me just so like when we played, I think if we played a chord here, recorded it. All right, so let's say now we play back, it may sound differently from. But he was saying it might be a portamento setting, so let me just take a look to see if like this one. So I'll read what he just says. At first it seems okay, saving and closing and opening again gives a problem. Some notes are played and some don't sound. For example, if you play continuous 16th notes, 4 silent, 2 seem normal, 4 silent. Setting this portamento to 0 milliseconds, all notes sound. So see if there's here. So where the portamento, so the portamento here. So see, Michael Teams, if you set this portamento control to 0 milliseconds, if that helps with that particular patch. Michael Teams was having issues. Great. see if there's live questions have snuck in. Okay, so Gareth wants everyone to whack-a-mole the like button. All right, so Gerald Ely asks as a question for Greg in the group. When you mix, do you render your VSTs and MIDI tracks to audio? I generally don't, unless I'm kind of near the end of my CPU load. So I'll try to keep everything in MIDI domain as much as possible. If, in the old days, it'd be common, like once we felt like we had a MIDI track, we would hide the MIDI track and play the audio to preserve system resources. But I know a lot of people still do that. As soon as their MIDI is set, render, boom. As soon as the MIDI is done, render, turn it audio. And there's a lot of people that work that way, that dealt with, we'll call them like more hardware instruments where program changes were often optional and delayed, and MIDI timing was suspect as you added more MIDI voices going down a serial MIDI interface. Like timing could drift on MIDI. The more ports that you're using on your MIDI interface, the timing could fluctuate. So people of that generation of MIDI tend to render as audio. I tend not to unless I'm running like short on system resources. Or if you're, at someone's place and they have a cool plugin that you don't have at your house, then you could render the file. All right, John Barry VU says, what is a library in Cubase, as in the file menu? Cheers. All right, so when we have a library can be, so we will see this, do we want to do like a new library? All right, so let's come over here and say, I'll do new project. Great. So let's say I'm doing like sound design, and maybe I'm working with a corporate client, like I've, friends that do like Walmart commercials and stuff regularly. So you may come over, or you're working sound design, or you're a film composer, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to develop sounds and like, playing from the sampler track. But let's come over here. I think I have some sound effects. Yeah. So let's say, okay, now. Let's say I have these in my project. I'll come over here. So let's say I delete all these as tracks, but these are my kind of sound design elements. Let's say for film, for corporate client, audio branding type of stuff. So I'm going to, let's say, remove all of these selected tracks. All right. So we do this. We open up the pool window, and we can see that we still have all the audio files referenced. So what I'm going to do is create a new library. Like my friend Fred, he does like audio branding for professional sports teams, like LA Kings hockey team. So we'll come over here. Right. Let me. One more time here. All right. So let's say. So we go to our pool, see all these files. So I'm going to. so let's come over here. I think if we say we want to export the pool. All right, so let's say, okay, we're doing this for LA Kings. Live vicariously through my friend Fred. Check out his work on the ARC Sci-Fi Networks on Wednesday. Okay, so let me just see if I put this on the desktop or not. Okay, so let's say Vikings desktop. Okay, so I'm going to put this on my desktop, NPL file. All right, so now when I'm here and, okay, let's say, okay, hockey season is starting again. I need all those, like, goal sounds. I need someone's in the penalty box sound, someone's in this, they're coming onto the ice sound. So at that point, we could say, okay, let's open a library. And now this is an independent pool. So I could have my project pool, but all of these sounds can still be available to access outside of the folder. So we could think of a library as an independent audio pool that's not tied to a particular project. So that way, those particular sounds can be accessed. They could be located in the safe spot. So if you're doing sonic branding, or let's say, a lot of times, again, film composers will do sound design for a couple weeks, come up with unique voices and sounds. Those audio files can be saved into a library, and then, if they get the sequel and the director's like, hey, I need that same sound for, when there's that dream sequence, that audio file, I need it, you could just simply open up the pool from the first film and simply access that audio, that collection of audio files from that project, and drag and drop it and have that be independent of the pool window. So if I come here and, get rid of these files or record new files. So the library is like an independent, project agnostic, if you will, project independent audio pool. So you could organize and quickly access audio files. Right, so we see from Yazian says, where can I find diagnostic and usage data in Steinberg products like Cubase 15 in preferences? I think once one of the things that Steinberg, I think, announced today is that they're going to be doing an optional usage dialog. So when you come here, let's go to settings. I'm not sure, one of the things that Steinberg will be doing is, they're going to be, you have the ability to opt in to track usage data. So let's say if we come over here, you can see more information. So if you enable this, you could see the locations. So what the usage logging, what the usage data is going to be doing, it doesn't store any of your projects, none of your creative work, but it's, going to be, okay, when someone goes from here to here to here, it's like, they did these 7 steps, and we noticed this crash happened when these particular 7 steps, but the 4th step, if it's taken away, isn't. So when we go from step 3 to 4 to 5, that can cause an issue. So that way they can improve stability. So users will have the option to be able to log in. Steinberg doesn't collect any of your media, any of your music, your projects, your MIDI information, your audio. We're not really interested in that. We just want to be able to kind of, have the option for users to share all of that data so they could do analysis to improve program stability. But if you go to your preferences, again, to general, you could see if you go to enable usage logging, you could just see it right there with more information. Great to see you, Aniazian. Hope you're well. John Costigan just sharing a tip of being able to raise the buffer size as you do audio mix downs, which can also speed up the process. My Logify asking if anyone knows of a band used Cubase, like bands that use Cubase. I mean, tons of musicians you go through some of the different artists. Like I was just helping Zed last week for his show. It's like Zed in the Park, big concert he's doing in New York City this Saturday. Just helping his team out. You guys do share the link with some artist. All right, so we see from John Barry says, thanks, Greg. So would you have two pulls in the project or are the files added? And or if I used, are they added to the local pool, reference the library file change? So I think it depends on your actual, so let's just do a new project here. All right, so we'll do our August 11th, 2026. So we're going to choose that as our project. All right, so we have no audio files here. So let's look at, I believe that depending on your preference, that when you have the file from the library and drop it into the project, it'll then get added into the local pool. That's my thinking, but let's test it just to make sure. So let's go open up our library. Okay, so we look at our pool here. Okay, we don't have any audio files. Let's go back here. I'm going to drop, say, aircraft audio file in. Do that. I go to my local pool. We see that we have the aircraft file. And then I think it's just going to be, at that point, if you have say we go to your preferences and you go to editing audio, if you have automatically copy all files to project folder, it will then copy the file into your project folder there. So won't show up into the local pool until it's actually used in the local project. So the local pool is always going to be a reflection of what's in the project, whereas the library file will be independent and in its location until it's used in a project. I think we had a couple other questions that were mailed in, so let me get those. Thanks for all the great questions today. Hope everyone's learned some new tricks. All right, so we see I have a couple easy questions about Groove Agent. Instead of getting Groove Agent SE1 in every pattern, I know there's a way to get example main 1 or main 2 as key commands. How to fix that? Great, so my project for today's live stream. Okay, so let's open up Groove Agent here. All right. So it says, so say in every pattern, instead of getting Groove Agent SE1 in every pattern, I know there's a way to get, for example, main 1, main 2 is key commands. How to fix that? So I'm not sure if you want to switch between these patterns with a key command. You can, just trigger them directly from MIDI. So, you could trigger this from like a C# 0 node to D0, D#. So I'm not sure if that's what you want to do. To switch. So it's not necessarily a key command if you want to trigger like the main 1 or main 2 pattern, but just triggering it from the MIDI note from a controller. So even if we go to like the software controller, we could over here down an octave. So you could, so as you trigger from and then you could, if you're triggering this pattern, you could also just throw in. So you could play MIDI notes to trigger the pattern and then play other notes from your controller to play in fills and cymbals as well. But I don't know of a keyboard shortcut to switch between like main 1, main 2, but it just responds to MIDI, or if you just drag it into the project as well. Okay, next question. So a question about how Media Bay works. It's difficult to find on YouTube. I've spent weeks rating results in Media Bay with stars: 3 good, 4 better, 5 best. I would like for guitars making 3 new columns for strum, riff, and arps. So how do I achieve that? Can you explain? Okay, so let's come over to our Media Bay. So we'll hit F5. All right, so let's say if we're looking and we want to add particular elements, so and we want to add our own criteria for searching. So when we come over here, you could activate the right zone in the Media Bay. We will go to the settings, and then there's a little plus symbol here. So we could make this text-based. We can make it a number. We can make it yes, no. So let's say I want to make this drum. Okay. So let's say, or I'll just say yes, no, and we'll say strum. Okay, let's make another one. So we'll come here, click on plus, and then you could say, so you want it strums. Well, it says fifth, but we'll say fill. Say yes, no. We'll call it fill. And let's make another one for arps. Again, Click on the plus. Yes, no. Then ARPs. Okay, so now when we come over here, we see our number of different columns. Let's say if you don't want to see the key, you could go to various, and then you could say, okay, is it ARPs? So look, so we could say, okay, this file is, when we come over here, we can say ARPs, and we'll say yes. Okay. And let's say these files, these presets, we'll say, I'm looking for drums. So these files, so yes for strum. So when you come over here, you can now just kind of search for fills, strums. So you could make your own kind of attributes. So we can say, show me, here's the ones that are strums. Here are the ones that are ARPs. So we'll say yes, and those are the presets that we've tagged with ARPs, fills, strums. So you could quickly navigate and search for whatever criteria that you have configured as well. So that way you could customize the media bay and find exactly what you want. And you could select multiple presets and then just say yes to multiple presets and then be able to find those very quickly. So make sure that you start off with the right zone exposed. Click on the settings, click on the plus, and then you could add, it could be a number, it could be a yes, no, it could just be text. And so if you just say yes, no, type in name, and then those will be searchable criteria for you. All right, so I think that's all of the questions that were mailed in for us. Let me just. All right, we see Sable Winters is joining. Always wonderful to see you on, Sable. Well. I'm Barry VU's just saying about the library that's brilliant. Greg, cheers. John Koskins just thanking myself and all the other helpful people in the Cubase Nation. Stay safe and groovy. Sable's on the move. We're popping in. All right, I think we are at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that pop in. If not, we'll wrap up a little bit early. Once again, we won't be having a live stream this Friday just because I have a wedding to go to that afternoon. But just so we'll be back on our normal schedule Tuesday. We will have some live streams that I will be missing because of a trip to Hamburg. I leave September 1st, so I'll be at the airport probably during the live stream time. But I'll see if I could arrange to do a live stream while in Hamburg. It would be a lot of fun to do it from the Steinberg office. Great. We'll see if there's other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up, and there's usually about a 20 to 30 second delay from speak to when here. See from Tim K. Says, thanks for another great session. Definitely learned a few new tricks. We see from Gerald Ely, says, great stream, Greg, and great input and questions. Everybody, lots to learn and practice. Have a great weekend. or 10 seconds or so. Alexander Plasko's just saying, have a safe trip, Greg. So I'm looking forward to going to Hamburg. Been too long. All right, looks like and also for my cousin's. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. We'll be back on 1 week from today on Tuesday. I think for the end of the month live stream, I think I have a special guest lined up. So I'll announce it as we get everything kind of finalized, but it looks good. We'll have kind of a famed audio engineer producer joining us, sharing some insights. Wonderful engineer. So I'll be getting that finalized in the next week or so. So look forward to that, and everyone have some good questions. With that, we will go ahead and wrap up. We'll be back next Tuesday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Enjoy your summertime if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Thanks for all the great questions. And we'll be back 1 week from today. Everyone take care and goodbye.